The auditorium buzzed with excitement as families and friends packed into the modest community center, eagerly waiting for the annual talent show to begin. It was an event the town looked forward to all year, a chance to celebrate the creativity and talents of its residents. From toddlers attempting to dance to teenagers bravely attempting stand-up comedy, the atmosphere was filled with warmth and laughter. But this year, there was an air of anticipation, as whispers circulated about one performer in particular. Ethan was only 12, but he had already lived through more hardship than most adults. He stood nervously backstage, clutching the microphone tightly, his small hands trembling. He wasn't sure he could go through with it, but the memory of his mother's face lingered in his mind, giving him the courage to try. She had always been his biggest supporter, his cheerleader. Every night, before she tucked him into bed, she would sing him a lullaby, her soft voice wrapping him in a cocoon of love and safety. But that was before the illness, before everything changed. Ethan's mother had passed away 2 years earlier, leaving him alone in a world that felt impossibly large and cold. After her passing, he had been placed in a local orphanage, and though the matron and other kids had become a sort of family, it was never quite the same. Music had become his refuge, a way to keep his mother's memory alive. In the quiet moments when everyone else was asleep, he would hum the lullabies she used to sing, closing his eyes and pretending she was still there beside him. Tonight, he planned to sing a song for her, a tribute he had written himself, pouring into it all the love, grief, and longing he felt. The matron had encouraged him to perform, knowing how much it meant to him. But as the moment approached, Ethan felt like he might crumble under the weight of his emotions. The stage was an unfamiliar territory, and he wasn't sure he could make it through the song without breaking down. As he waited for his name to be called, he looked out from behind the curtain and scanned the audience. He saw familiar faces, teachers, neighbors, kids from school, all gathered with bright smiles and eager eyes. But there were also people he didn't recognize, faces he had never seen before. A few had expressions that seemed almost skeptical, as if questioning what a scrawny, quiet boy like him could possibly bring to the stage. He felt his stomach twist with nerves, a rising tide of self-doubt threatening to drown his resolve. Then he saw her. Sitting toward the back, partially obscured by shadows, was a woman who bore a striking resemblance to his mother. For a moment, he forgot where he was, his heart skipping a beat as he imagined her there, watching him, encouraging him. He blinked, shaking himself back to reality. Of course, it wasn't her, but somehow the thought of her presence, real or imagined, gave him strength. The announcer's voice echoed through the speakers, calling his name. It was time. Ethan took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage, his legs feeling as though they were made of lead. The bright stage lights blinded him momentarily, but he kept walking until he reached the microphone stand. There was a hushed silence as the crowd settled, all eyes fixed on him. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, so loud he was certain everyone could hear it. He looked out over the audience once more, feeling their expectant gaze pressing in on him. A wave of fear washed over him, but he pushed it down, closing his eyes and remembering why he was here. This song was for his mother, a way to thank her, to honor her. He took another deep breath, opened his mouth, and began to sing. The first few notes were shaky, his voice trembling with nerves. But as he continued, something shifted. He could almost feel his mother's presence surrounding him, her warmth and love enveloping him like a comforting blanket. His voice grew stronger, more confident, each word infused with raw emotion. The lyrics spoke of love and loss, of the nights they spent together singing, of the emptiness he felt without her, and of his determination to keep her memory alive. As he sang, the room was silent, captivated. Some in the audience began to tear up, moved by the vulnerability and honesty in his voice. He sang as if he were speaking directly to her, his eyes closed, lost in the moment. The words flowed from him, each note a part of his heart, a part of his soul. And then, just as he reached the song's climax, something unexpected happened. The woman in the back, the one he had noticed earlier who reminded him of his mother, rose from her seat and slowly made her way forward. Ethan didn't see her, his eyes still closed as he poured himself into the final lines of his song. But the audience noticed, their attention shifting between the boy on stage and the mysterious woman approaching. As he sang the last note, he finally opened his eyes, his gaze falling on the woman now standing near the front of the stage. She looked up at him, her expression a mixture of awe and sadness. There was something familiar in her eyes, a warmth that reminded him of his mother, and for a brief moment, he felt a connection, as though she somehow understood the depth of his pain. The room erupted into applause, the sound overwhelming him. People were on their feet, clapping, some wiping away tears, moved by his performance. But Ethan barely noticed, his attention still focused on the woman in front of him. She smiled softly, mouthing something to him that he couldn't quite hear over the applause. He felt a strange sense of peace, as though a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying had been lifted. After a few moments, the applause died down, and people began to file out of the auditorium, still murmuring about the boy with the angelic voice. But the woman lingered, waiting as Ethan descended from the stage. As he approached her, she extended her hand, introducing herself as Anna, a close friend of his mother's from years ago. She had only recently moved back to town and hadn't known of his mother's passing until that night. She explained that she had heard rumors about the orphan boy with the beautiful voice and had come out of curiosity, never expecting to be so profoundly moved. Ethan listened, feeling a mixture of joy and sadness. It was as if fate had brought her here, someone who had known his mother, someone who could tell him stories about her that he had never heard. Anna shared a few memories, painting a picture of a woman who was strong, kind, and fiercely devoted to her son. Each story felt like a gift, filling in the gaps of his mother's life that he had never known. And then, in a moment that took him completely by surprise, Anna made him an offer. She wanted to become a part of his life, to be there for him in a way that his mother no longer could. She had no children of her own and saw in Ethan a reflection of the woman she had loved and missed. She wanted to support him, to help him chase his dreams of singing, to give him a home where he could feel loved and safe. Ethan was stunned, overwhelmed by the kindness and generosity of this stranger who felt so familiar. He wasn't sure what to say, the words sticking in his throat. He looked up at her, searching her face for sincerity, and saw only compassion and understanding. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone as he had thought. The night ended with a quiet conversation between them, two souls connected by the memory of a woman they both loved. As they left the auditorium together, the town still buzzing with talk of the orphan boy's incredible performance, Ethan felt a warmth in his heart that he hadn't felt since his mother's passing. And as he looked up at the night sky, he couldn't help but feel that somewhere his mother was watching, smiling, and proud of the boy she had raised. Ethan's life had always been a quiet one, marked by days spent in school and nights in the orphanage, his time filled with books, music, and the company of the other children. The orphanage was a small, aging building on the edge of town, where kids played on worn swings, and the paint on the walls was beginning to peel. It wasn't glamorous, but it was home. And for Ethan, the friends he had there were as close to family as he had known since losing his mother. In the months after his mother passed, Ethan's grief had been overwhelming. He felt as though he were moving through a fog, each day blending into the next, his heart heavy with an ache that seemed impossible to describe. But slowly, music became his solace. At first, he would simply hum to himself, revisiting the lullabies his mother used to sing, the familiar melodies wrapping around him like a comforting embrace. Eventually, humming turned into singing, and singing turned into writing songs of his own, each one a way to connect with her memory and express the feelings he kept locked inside. Life at the orphanage was stable but unremarkable, each day following the same rhythm. School, chores, meals, and then quiet time before bed. The matron, Mrs. Hill, was a kind woman with a warm smile who always encouraged the children to pursue their passions, no matter how small or silly they seemed. She had noticed Ethan's love for music and often found him in quiet corners, singing softly to himself, lost in his own world. One evening, as he sat in the corner of the common room with his notebook, scribbling down lyrics, Mrs. Hill approached him with a gentle smile. She had a way of making even the most reluctant children feel comfortable, and Ethan was no exception. Sitting down beside him, she peered over his shoulder, reading the lines he'd written. "That's beautiful, Ethan," she murmured, her voice warm and sincere. "Your mother would be so proud." Her words, simple as they were, struck a chord in him. He had always feared he might forget her, her face, her voice, the way she would brush his hair out of his eyes and tell him everything would be okay. But music was his way of keeping her memory alive, of preserving the little pieces of her that lingered in his heart. "Mrs. Hill," he said quietly, do you think she can hear me when I sing?" Mrs. Hill placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, her gaze soft. "I like to believe that those we love are always listening, even when we can't see them. Your mother's love for you was strong, Ethan. I don't think something like that ever really goes away." The words stayed with him, echoing in his mind as he went about his daily routine. In the days leading up to the talent show, Mrs. Hill continued to encourage him, her gentle reminders and words of support giving him the strength to keep going, even when doubts crept in. He practiced his song every night after everyone else had gone to bed, his voice echoing softly through the empty hallways, each note a quiet tribute to the woman he missed so dearly. But as the day of the talent show approached, nerves began to build. He was terrified of standing up in front of an audience, of letting them see the vulnerable parts of himself that he usually kept hidden. More than anything, he worried that he wouldn't be able to do his mother justice, that his performance would fall short of the love he felt for her. The morning of the show, he awoke with a pit in his stomach, his hands already clammy with anxiety. He went through the motions of getting dressed and eating breakfast, but his mind was elsewhere, filled with thoughts of the performance and the weight of his emotions. The other children noticed his quiet demeanor, casting him curious glances, but no one said anything. They knew how much this meant to him. At last, the time came to head to the community center, and as they piled into the old van that served as the orphanage's transport, Ethan felt a strange mixture of excitement and dread. The town's community center was modest, with simple decorations and rows of folding chairs set up for the audience. But to Ethan, it felt like the grandest stage in the world, the weight of its importance pressing down on him with every step. As they entered the building, he saw familiar faces from school, neighbors who had known him and his mother, and strangers who had come simply to support the town's young talent. The sight of them all made his heart race, the reality of what he was about to do settling over him like a heavy blanket. Mrs. Hill stayed by his side, offering him a reassuring smile. "You're going to be wonderful, Ethan. Just remember why you're doing this. This is your chance to share a piece of your heart with the world." He nodded, swallowing hard, his throat dry. In his hand, he clutched the small notebook where he had written the song's lyrics, his fingers tracing the worn edges of the pages. The words were his anchor, a reminder of his mother and the love she had given him, the strength she had instilled in him. As the talent show began, Ethan watched the other performances with a mixture of admiration and apprehension. There were dancers, comedians, musicians, each one putting a piece of themselves on display, sharing their talents with the crowd. He admired their courage, their confidence, but he couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability that weighed on him. Finally, it was his turn. The announcer called his name, and a hush fell over the crowd as he made his way to the stage. His legs felt like they were made of lead, each step an effort, but he kept going, his eyes fixed on the microphone that waited for him. He reached the center of the stage, the bright lights blinding him momentarily, and he took a deep breath, clutching the microphone with both hands. The silence in the room was deafening, every eye on him, waiting, expecting. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, his hands trembling. For a brief moment, he considered turning back, escaping the pressure and the weight of his emotions. But then he remembered Mrs. Hill's words, the encouragement she had given him. And he remembered his mother, her voice, her warmth. This was for her. Closing his eyes, he took a deep breath and began to sing. His voice was soft at first, barely more than a whisper, but as he continued, it grew stronger, filled with a raw, unfiltered emotion. The lyrics told the story of his love for his mother, his memories of their time together, and the emptiness he felt without her. He sang of the lullabies she used to sing, the warmth of her embrace, and the pain of losing her too soon. The audience was silent, captivated by the honesty in his voice, the vulnerability he allowed them to see. As he reached the chorus, his voice cracked, a single tear slipping down his cheek. But he kept going, each note a tribute to the woman who had given him everything. His words filled the room, touching hearts, resonating with anyone who had ever loved and lost. In that moment, it was as if his mother were there with him, her presence wrapping around him like a comforting embrace. He felt a sense of peace, a connection that went beyond words, as if she were telling him that she was proud of him, that she was with him. The thought gave him strength, and he poured everything he had into the final verse, his voice rising, filled with both love and sorrow. As he sang the last note, the silence lingered, the audience holding their breath, as if afraid to break the moment. Then a single clap rang out, followed by another and another, until the room erupted into applause. People were on their feet, clapping, wiping away tears, their expressions filled with admiration and empathy. Ethan looked out over the crowd, his heart pounding, his chest heaving with emotion. In the midst of the applause, he noticed a woman standing near the back of the room, her face partially obscured by shadows. She was watching him with a strange intensity, her expression one of both sorrow and pride. He couldn't explain why, but something about her gaze felt familiar, comforting, as if she understood the depth of his pain. The applause continued, the room filled with the sound of people cheering, clapping, moved by the courage and vulnerability he had shown. Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him, a sense of accomplishment that went beyond words. He had done it. He had honored his mother's memory, shared a piece of his heart with the world, and in doing so, he had found a measure of peace. As he left the stage, he felt Mrs. Hill's arms wrap around him in a warm embrace. "You were incredible, Ethan," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Your mother would be so proud." Ethan nodded, a small smile breaking through his tears. He knew she was right. In that moment, he felt his mother's presence more strongly than ever, a sense of love and pride that filled him with a quiet strength. He had faced his fears, shared his story, and in doing so, he had honored the woman who had given him everything. But as he looked back over his shoulder, he saw that the woman who had been watching him from the back of the room was gone, leaving only an empty space where she had stood. He felt a strange sense of loss, as if he had missed something important, but he brushed it aside, focusing instead on the warmth of the applause, the feeling of his mother's love that lingered in his in the days following the talent show. Ethan's life took on a surreal quality. Word of his performance spread quickly through town. People he barely knew, neighbors, teachers, even kids from school who had never spoken to him before, began approaching him, offering quiet words of support and admiration. They called him brave, talented, a little hero. At first, the attention made him uncomfortable, and he often found himself ducking his head and shuffling away whenever someone tried to talk to him. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, and he wasn't sure he wanted to be. All he had wanted was to sing for his mother, to feel close to her again, even if only for a few minutes. But it seemed that his song had touched something deeper, resonating in ways he hadn't anticipated. Despite his reluctance to embrace the spotlight, there was one part of the experience that warmed his heart. The presence of Anna, the woman he'd met after his performance. She had returned to town after many years, and, as she told him, had once been his mother's closest friend. She was a quiet woman with a gentle demeanor, her eyes filled with a kindness that reminded Ethan of his mother. Over the next few days, Anna visited the orphanage, spending time with Ethan whenever she could, sharing stories about his mother that he had never known. One afternoon, as they sat on a bench beneath a large oak tree in the orphanage courtyard, Anna shared a memory that made Ethan's heart ache and swell with love. She told him how his mother had always been the first to lend a hand to anyone in need, how she would give up her own meal to feed a stranger or stay up late into the night, sewing clothes for children who didn't have any. Anna spoke with a reverence, her voice soft and filled with admiration. "Your mother had the kind of heart that people don't forget," Anna said, her eyes distant as she remembered. "She was selfless, always putting others before herself. You know, she once told me that you were her greatest joy in life, her reason for everything she did. I think, in her own way, she's still with you, Ethan. I think she's always going to be." Ethan listened, tears prickling at the corners of his eyes. He had known, of course, that his mother loved him. She had shown him in countless ways every day of his life. But hearing it from someone else, hearing the stories and memories that Anna shared, gave him a new perspective, a deeper understanding of the woman his mother had been. It was as if, through Anna's words, he was meeting his mother all over again, discovering new pieces of her that he hadn't known existed. As they continued talking, Anna's gaze grew more serious, and she turned to him with a look of determination that caught him off guard. "Ethan," she said slowly, "I've been thinking. I want to offer you something. Something I wish I could have offered your mother when she was still alive." Ethan looked up at her, curiosity and a hint of anxiety in his eyes. He wasn't sure what she meant, but there was something in her tone that made him feel like this was a moment he would remember for the rest of his life. "I don't have any family of my own," Anna continued, her voice steady but soft. "And since coming back here, I've realized how much I missed your mother and how much I missed the family we could have been. I can't bring her back, Ethan, but if you'd be willing, I'd like to take care of you, to be here for you in the way that I know your mother would want. I can't replace her, but maybe I can be a part of your life in a way that gives you the home you deserve." The words hung in the air, each one sinking into Ethan's heart with a mix of hope and uncertainty. He had lived in the orphanage for so long that he had almost forgotten what it felt like to be part of a family, to have someone who loved him unconditionally, someone who was there not out of obligation, but out of choice. The idea of having a home, a real home, with someone who cared about him as deeply as Anna did, was both exhilarating and terrifying. But as he looked into Anna's eyes, he saw the sincerity there, the love and compassion that mirrored the way his mother had looked at him. He felt a flicker of warmth, a spark of hope that had been buried deep within him, hidden beneath layers of grief and loneliness. Do you really mean that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Anna nodded, her expression softening. "More than anything. I know it's a lot to take in, and I don't expect you to decide right now. But I want you to know that you're not alone, Ethan. You don't have to go through life by yourself. If you're willing, I'd be honored to be a part of your life, to give you the family your mother would have wanted for you." For a long moment, Ethan was silent, his mind racing with emotions he couldn't fully understand. He felt a mixture of joy and sorrow, of hope and fear, all tangled together in a way that made his heart ache. But as he looked at Anna, he realized that he wanted to take the chance, to trust her, to let himself believe that he could have a family again. Finally, he nodded, a small tentative smile breaking through his uncertainty. I'd like that too." In the days that followed, the news spread quickly through the orphanage. The other children were thrilled for Ethan, many of them offering hugs and congratulations, their excitement infectious. Mrs. Hill, the matron, was especially pleased, her eyes bright with pride and joy whenever she looked at Ethan. She had always known he was destined for something special, And seeing him find a home with someone who loved him filled her with a sense of fulfillment she hadn't expected. But not everyone was as supportive. A few people in town were skeptical, questioning whether Anna, who had been away for so many years, truly understood the responsibility she was taking on. Rumors circulated, whispers about her past, speculation about her motives. Some wondered if she was simply trying to ease her own loneliness, using Ethan as a way to fill a void in her life. Others suggested that she might not be able to provide for him in the long term, that her intentions, though well-meaning, might not be enough to give Ethan the stable life he deserved. Ethan tried not to let the whispers bother him, but he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the back of his mind. He had lived most of his life in the orphanage, surrounded by people who understood him, who knew his story. The thought of leaving that world behind, of stepping into the unknown, was both exciting and terrifying. He found himself questioning his decision late at night, wondering if he was truly ready for such a big change. But Anna's presence was a constant reassurance. She visited him every day, bringing small gifts, a book she thought he might like, a scarf she had knitted, a new notebook for his songs. She listened to him talk about his fears, his hopes, his dreams, her patience and understanding helping him find clarity in the midst of his uncertainty. Gradually, his fears began to fade, replaced by a sense of trust, a belief that maybe, just maybe, he had found a place where he truly belonged. One evening, as they sat together in the orphanage garden, watching the sunset, Anna turned to him with a smile that was both warm and bittersweet. "Ethan," she said softly, "there's something I want you to know. Your mother, she was one of the strongest people I've ever known. She faced so many challenges, but she never gave up, never let herself be defeated. And I see that same strength in you." Ethan looked at her, his heart swelling with pride and love. In that moment, he felt a connection to his mother that went beyond words, a bond that stretched across time and memory, binding them together in a way that was both painful and beautiful. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan settled into his new life with Anna, finding a sense of peace and belonging that he hadn't known since his mother's passing. He continued to sing, to write songs, pouring his heart into each melody, each lyric a tribute to the love that had shaped him, the people who had given him a chance to dream again. And though there were still moments of doubt, moments when he wondered if he deserved this happiness, he knew, deep down, that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Anna had given him a family, a home, a future filled with possibilities. And in doing so, she had honored his mother's memory in the most beautiful way possible. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt whole. And as he looked out over the town, the community that had embraced him, he knew that he was not alone. He was surrounded by love, by hope, by the legacy of a woman who had taught him the true meaning of strength. And in that knowledge, he found a peace that would carry him forward, guiding him through whatever challenges lay ahead. Life settled into a steady rhythm for Ethan as he adjusted to his new life with Anna. It felt strange at first, waking up in a real home, surrounded by familiar comforts and small, thoughtful touches that spoke of care. Anna's house was modest but warm, filled with plants and cozy, well-loved furniture. She had a talent for creating an atmosphere that was both welcoming and safe, a quality Ethan hadn't fully appreciated until he experienced it himself. Each morning, he would wake up to the smell of fresh coffee and the gentle hum of Anna's voice as she moved through the kitchen, humming a tune that often reminded him of his mother. It was a peaceful routine, one that gradually began to feel like home. Anna had made it clear from the start that she wanted Ethan to feel free to express himself, to be open about his thoughts, his dreams, and even his fears. She encouraged him to talk about his mother, to share memories and stories that kept her spirit alive. At night, they would sit together in the living room, sharing stories by the soft glow of a lamp, Anna's gentle questions drawing out details that Ethan hadn't thought about in years. Slowly, he began to open up, finding a voice for the emotions he had kept locked away for so long. The months passed, and Ethan grew more comfortable, more confident in his new life. He began to thrive in ways he hadn't expected, finding joy in the little things, playing in the park, attending school events, and most importantly, continuing to sing. Anna encouraged his passion, signing him up for voice lessons with a local music teacher who had once been a professional singer. Under her guidance, Ethan's voice grew stronger, richer, filled with a depth of emotion that left those who heard him moved and captivated. One Saturday afternoon, Anna took him to a small cafe in town that held open mic nights. It was a quaint place, the walls lined with photographs of past performers, and the stage was little more than a raised platform in the corner. But to Ethan, it felt like an opportunity to share a piece of himself, a chance to honor his mother's memory in a way that felt meaningful. Anna encouraged him, promising to be there in the audience, cheering him on no matter what. As he stood on that small stage, looking out at the handful of patrons scattered around the room, Ethan felt a familiar wave of nerves wash over him. But this time, it was different. He knew he wasn't alone. Anna was there, smiling up at him with a look of pride and encouragement that steadied his heart. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and began to sing. The song he had chosen was one he had written himself, a tribute to his mother that spoke of love, loss, and resilience. His voice filled the room, soft and haunting, each note carrying the weight of his memories, the strength of his love. As he sang, he felt a profound connection, as if his mother were there beside him, her spirit entwined with each word, each melody. The cafe grew quiet, the audience listening with rapt attention, drawn in by the honesty and vulnerability in his voice. When he finished, the room was silent for a moment, and then the applause began, soft at first, but growing louder as people rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Anna was there, her eyes shining with pride, her hands clasped over her heart as she watched him. It was a moment that stayed with Ethan, a memory that felt as bright and enduring as a star. In the weeks that followed, word of his performance spread through town, and invitations began to come in. Local events, charity functions, even neighboring towns wanted him to perform. Each opportunity was a chance to share his story, to connect with others who had experienced loss, who understood the journey of finding strength in the midst of pain. His music became a bridge, a way to reach people's hearts, to remind them of the love that endured even in the face of hardship. But with each new performance, there were also challenges. The attention was overwhelming at times, and Ethan struggled to balance his newfound fame with the quiet, private life he preferred. He was grateful for the opportunities, but he often felt a sense of conflict, a worry that he might lose himself in the process. Anna was always there, offering gentle guidance, reminding him to stay true to himself, to remember why he had started singing in the first place. One evening, after a particularly intense performance at a local benefit concert, Ethan sat with Anna on the back porch, watching the stars. He had been quiet, introspective, his thoughts a tangled mix of gratitude and uncertainty. Sensing his unease, Anna reached over, taking his hand in hers, her gaze soft and understanding. "Ethan," she said, her voice gentle, "you don't have to do this if it doesn't feel right. You've already done so much, touched so many hearts. But this is your journey. It's okay to step back, to take time for yourself." Ethan looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. He had been so focused on honoring his mother, on sharing her memory with the world, that he hadn't stopped to consider his own feelings, his own needs. He realized that he didn't have to prove anything to anyone. His mother would have loved him regardless of his accomplishments, simply for being himself. That night marked a turning point for him. He began to approach his music with a new perspective, one that balanced his passion with a sense of self-care, a respect for his own boundaries. He continued to perform, but he allowed himself to say no when he needed to prioritize his own well-being. Anna's support gave him the strength to make those choices, to stay grounded even as his world expanded. But just as he was finding his balance, life threw an unexpected challenge his way. A prominent local businessman, Mr. Carson, reached out with an offer that seemed too good to be true. He had heard Ethan sing at the benefit concert and was so moved that he wanted to sponsor Ethan's music education, offering to fund private lessons with a renowned vocal coach in the city, as well as recording sessions in a professional studio. It was a dream opportunity, one that promised to open doors Ethan hadn't even considered. However, there was a catch. Mr. Carson wanted Ethan to sign an exclusive contract, one that would require him to perform at corporate events and promotional functions organized by Carson's company. In return, Ethan would receive a generous stipend and access to resources that would otherwise be out of reach. The offer was tempting. A chance to elevate his music to a new level, to reach a wider audience. But it came with strings attached, commitments that felt at odds with the personal, heartfelt nature of his songs. Ethan felt torn, caught between the allure of opportunity and his own instincts. He turned to Anna, sharing his concerns, his fear that accepting the offer might compromise the authenticity of his music. She listened patiently, her expression thoughtful, and then she offered a piece of advice that stayed with him. Ethan, your music is special because it comes from your heart. It's a gift, something that can't be bought or controlled. You have to decide what's most important to you, fame and success, or staying true to yourself. There's no right or wrong choice, but remember that your voice is yours, and only you can decide how to use it. Her words gave him clarity, a reminder of the reasons he had started singing, the love and memory of his mother that had inspired him from the beginning. After a long night of reflection, he made his decision. He thanked Mr. Carson for his offer but declined, choosing instead to pursue his music on his own terms, to keep his songs as pure expressions of his heart. The decision brought a sense of peace, a feeling of freedom that reaffirmed his love for music. He continued to perform at local events, sharing his songs with those who needed them most, connecting with people in a way that felt genuine, personal. His journey wasn't about fame or fortune. It was about love, resilience, and the enduring legacy of his mother's spirit. The community rallied around him, supporting his choice, celebrating his music, his strength, his authenticity. He became something of a local hero, a symbol of resilience and hope, a reminder that even in the face of loss, one could find joy, purpose, and love. In time, Ethan came to realize that he didn't need to prove anything, to achieve anything beyond what he already had. His mother's memory was alive in every note, every melody, a part of him that would never fade. And as he looked out over the town, the people who had become his family, his community, he knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Ethan's journey was far from over, but he had found his path, his purpose, his home. And with Anna by his side, he faced the future with a heart full of hope, a voice that carried his mother's love, and a spirit that shone as brightly as the stars above. As time went on, Ethan's journey continued to unfold in ways he hadn't anticipated, each new chapter bringing lessons, challenges, and moments of joy that wove together into the fabric of his life. His decision to pursue music on his own terms had granted him a sense of inner peace, a confidence in himself that resonated through every note he sang. He became known not just for his talent, but for the honesty and depth of emotion in his music, which seemed to reach out and touch the hearts of anyone who listened. But life has a way of testing even the strongest of spirits, and soon, Ethan faced yet another trial, one that would challenge his newfound strength and reshape his understanding of resilience, family, and community. One chilly autumn evening, as he and Anna were returning home from a small performance at a local charity event, they noticed smoke billowing from a distance. At first, they thought it might be someone's chimney or perhaps a bonfire. But as they drove closer, they realized the smoke was thick, dark, and coming from the direction of their neighborhood. Anna's grip on the steering wheel tightened, a look of worry flashing across her face as she pressed down on the accelerator, her heart pounding with a sense of dread. When they reached the street, their fears were confirmed. A fire had broken out in a nearby building, a small apartment complex that housed several families, many of whom they knew. People had gathered outside, watching in horror as the flames consumed the building, their faces pale in the glow of the fire. The firefighters were already on the scene, hoses spraying water into the inferno, but the flames were relentless, their heat searing and intense. Ethan felt his heart sink as he recognized some of the faces in the crowd, neighbors, friends, people he had grown up around. He could see the fear in their eyes, the helplessness, as they watched their homes and belongings go up in flames. It was a sight that shook him to his core, a reminder of how fragile life could be, how quickly everything could change. As he scanned the crowd, he noticed a woman standing off to the side, clutching two small children to her chest, her face streaked with soot and tears. It was Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman who had lived in the building for years, raising her grandchildren after their parents had passed away. Ethan had often seen her at the local park, watching the children play with a quiet, steadfast love that reminded him of his own mother. Without a second thought, he rushed over to her, his heart pounding with concern. "Mrs. Thompson, are you all right? Do you need help?" The woman looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and relief. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "We're safe, thank God. But everything's gone. Everything we had is in that building." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. He could see the heartbreak in her eyes, the loss and fear etched into every line of her face. He knew what it was like to lose everything, to feel adrift and alone. And in that moment, he felt a fierce determination to do something, anything, to help her, to help all of them. Anna joined him, her face grim but resolute. "We'll figure this out, Mrs. Thompson," she said softly, placing a reassuring hand on the woman's shoulder. "We'll find a way to get you and everyone else through this. You're not alone." The words seemed to bring a measure of comfort to Mrs. Thompson, who nodded, her grip on her grandchildren tightening. But as Ethan looked around, he realized that the fire had left more than just one family in need. There were dozens of people who had been displaced, people who had lost not only their homes but their sense of security, their peace of mind. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Anna, ever resourceful, reached out to local charities, churches, and community organizations, rallying support and organizing a relief effort to help those affected by the fire. Ethan, too, found himself caught up in the wave of compassion and generosity that swept through the town. Together, he and Anna worked tirelessly, gathering supplies, coordinating donations, and finding temporary housing for those who had been left homeless. But Ethan wanted to do more than simply provide food and shelter. He wanted to offer something that would bring hope, a sense of normalcy in the midst of chaos. And so, he decided to organize a small concert, a benefit event that would not only raise funds, but lift the spirits of those who had been affected by the tragedy. The entire town rallied around the idea, volunteering their time, their resources, and their talents to make the event a success. Local musicians, artists, and performers came forward, offering their services for free, and businesses donated food, supplies, and equipment. The community center was transformed into a haven of warmth and light, the walls adorned with handmade decorations and messages of support from children who had drawn pictures and written letters for the families who had lost everything. When the night of the concert arrived, the community center was packed with people. Families, friends, neighbors, everyone had come together, united by a common purpose, a shared sense of resilience. Ethan stood backstage, watching as people filled the room, their faces lit with a mixture of hope and anticipation. It was a sight that filled him with both pride and humility, a reminder of the strength and kindness that lay at the heart of the community. As he stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent, all eyes turning to him with a sense of expectation. He took a deep breath, letting the love and support that filled the room wash over him, steadying his nerves. And then, with a soft, steady voice, he began to sing. The song he had chosen was one of hope, a melody that spoke of endurance, of finding light even in the darkest of times. His voice rose and fell, carrying the weight of his emotions, the compassion he felt for those who had suffered, the gratitude he felt for the people who had come together to help. Each note was a tribute to the resilience of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the face of loss, there was always a way forward. As he sang, he could see the impact his words were having on the audience. People held each other close, some wiping away tears, others smiling softly, their faces reflecting the same mix of sorrow and strength. It was a moment of collective healing, a chance for the community to come together, to share in their grief and their hope. When he finished, the room erupted into applause, the sound echoing through the walls, filling the space with a sense of unity that was both powerful and humbling. Ethan looked out over the crowd, his heart swelling with pride and love, a feeling of fulfillment that went beyond words. He knew, in that moment, that he had found his place, his purpose. His music was not just a way to honor his mother. It was a way to bring people together, to remind them of their own strength, their own capacity for kindness and compassion. In the days that followed, the concert became the talk of the town, a beacon of hope that continued to inspire people long after the last note had faded. The funds raised were enough to provide temporary housing, clothing, and essentials for every family affected by the fire. But more than that, the concert had brought the community closer, forging bonds that would endure long after the memories of the tragedy had faded. For Ethan, the experience was transformative. He had faced his fears, embraced his role as a leader, and discovered a strength within himself that he hadn't known existed. He realized that his music had the power to heal, to inspire, to bring hope to those who needed it most. And in that knowledge, he found a sense of purpose, a path that stretched out before him, filled with possibilities. As he stood on the steps of the community center, watching the people he loved, the friends and neighbors who had become his family, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. Life had tested him, had taken much from him, but it had also given him gifts beyond measure. A loving guardian in Anna, a supportive community, and a talent that allowed him to connect with others in ways that went beyond words. Looking up at the sky, he whispered a silent prayer of thanks to his mother, a promise to continue honoring her memory, to use his music to make a difference, to bring light into the lives of others. And as the stars shone down on him, he felt her presence, her love, a reminder that she was with him, guiding him, proud of the person he had become. Ethan's journey was far from over, but he knew, with a certainty that filled his heart, that he was exactly where he was meant to be. As the years passed, Ethan's life blossomed in ways he could never have imagined. The small boy who once sang his heart out in memory of his mother had grown into a young man whose voice and story inspired not only his town, but countless people beyond its borders. His music continued to evolve, his lyrics deepening, reflecting his journey, his heartache, his triumphs, and the enduring impact of his mother's love. Ethan's concerts became a cherished tradition in his community. Every year, he held a benefit event, bringing people together to support various causes close to his heart. Youth programs, homeless shelters, and mental health organizations, all inspired by the struggles he'd overcome and the support he had received from those around him. People came from nearby towns, eager to hear his music and witness the magic that seemed to unfold whenever he took the stage. Ethan had an uncanny ability to turn ordinary words into something profound, his voice carrying a warmth and authenticity that left a lasting impression on everyone who listened. But one particular year, his concert took on an especially poignant significance. It was the 10th anniversary of the devastating fire that had shaken the community to its core, and Ethan wanted to honor the families who had lost so much that night, including Mrs. Thompson, who had since passed away. Her grandchildren, now young adults, were present that evening, sitting in the front row, their faces lit with quiet admiration. They had stayed in touch with Ethan over the years, often attending his concerts and expressing their gratitude for his friendship and support during the darkest period of their lives. Ethan had prepared something special for this milestone concert, a song that he had written specifically for the occasion. It was a tribute to resilience, to the strength of the human spirit, and to the bonds that held them together through every trial. He titled it The Light We Carry, and it spoke of love, loss, and the courage to keep moving forward, even when everything felt uncertain. It was, in many ways, his story, but he knew it belonged to everyone in that room, to everyone who had faced hardship and emerged stronger. As he stood on the stage, the lights dimmed, and the first soft notes of the piano filled the room. Ethan took a deep breath, his eyes closing as he let himself sink into the music. His voice rose, soft and haunting, each word carrying the weight of his experiences, the love he held for his mother, for Anna, for his community, for every person who had touched his life. The lyrics spoke of the fire, of the pain and loss, but also of the love that endured, the strength that had brought them through. The audience was silent, their eyes fixed on him, many with tears streaming down their cheeks. He could feel their energy, their emotions mirroring his own, a shared understanding that transcended words. As he reached the final verse, he looked out over the crowd, his gaze falling on Anna, who was watching him with pride shining in her eyes. She had aged in the years since she'd taken him in, her hair streaked with silver, her hands showing the signs of a life well lived. But her spirit was as vibrant as ever. She had been his rock, his guide, the person who had taught him that family was not defined by blood but by love. After the concert, people gathered around him, offering words of gratitude, sharing their own stories of loss and resilience. Some spoke of loved ones they had lost, others shared tales of hardship, of challenges they had faced and overcome. It was a night of connection, of healing, a reminder of the power of community, of music, of love. Ethan listened to each story, offering words of comfort, knowing that in a way he was giving back the support he had once received. But as the evening wore on, a familiar face appeared in the crowd, catching Ethan by surprise. Standing near the back of the room was Mr. Carson, the businessman who had once offered him a lucrative contract in exchange for an exclusive deal. Ethan hadn't seen him in years, and he wondered what had brought the man back, what had drawn him to this night, this concert. Mr. Carson approached him with a warm smile, his demeanor different from what Ethan remembered. He seemed humbled, almost reflective, his usual air of authority softened by something Ethan couldn't quite place. "Ethan," Mr. Carson said, extending his hand. "It's good to see you again. I've been following your career, watching from a distance. I must say, I didn't expect you to make it this far. But after tonight, I understand why you turned down my offer all those years ago." Ethan shook his hand, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I did what felt right. My music, it's a part of me, something I couldn't put a price on." Mr. Carson nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I can see that now. You've built something far more meaningful than anything I could have offered you. Your music has brought people together, given them hope. That's something money can't buy." He paused, glancing around the room at the people gathered in groups, laughing, crying, sharing stories. "I came here tonight because I wanted to see for myself what you had created. And I have to admit, I'm deeply moved." There was a sincerity in Mr. Carson's voice that Ethan hadn't expected, a vulnerability that hinted at his own experiences, his own struggles. Ethan realized that the years had changed him too, that even people like Mr. Carson were not immune to life's hardships, that they too carried burdens, faced regrets, sought redemption in quiet moments. In a gesture that surprised them both, Ethan placed a hand on Mr. Carson's shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of the man's journey. "Thank you for coming tonight. It means a lot to me. And I hope it means something to you too." Mr. Carson nodded, his gaze softening. "It does, Ethan. It really does." As the night wound down, Ethan found himself outside the community center, looking up at the stars, a sense of peace settling over him. He was joined by Anna, who slipped her hand into his, her smile gentle and knowing. "You've come so far, Ethan," she murmured, her voice filled with pride. "Your mother would be so proud of the man you've become." Ethan looked down at her, a warmth spreading through his chest. "I wouldn't be here without you, Anna. You gave me a family when I had none. You taught me that love can heal even the deepest wounds." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their journey shared and understood. In that quiet, starlit night, Ethan felt a profound sense of gratitude, a love that encompassed not only his mother's memory, but also the life he had built, the people he had come to cherish. As they walked back to the car, Anna spoke again, her voice thoughtful. "You know, Ethan, I think you found your purpose. You've given so much to this town, to these people, but there's a whole world out there that needs to hear your music, that could benefit from your story. Maybe it's time to take that next step." Ethan nodded, her words resonating with something deep inside him. He had always known that his journey would take him beyond the boundaries of his hometown, that his music was meant to reach others, to heal, to inspire. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew that he was ready, that he had the strength, the love, and the courage to face whatever lay ahead. Over the following months, he began to make plans, reaching out to organizations, charities, and music venues across the country, each connection opening new doors, new possibilities. His performances became a blend of music and storytelling, each song a chapter in the story of his life, a testament to the love that had shaped him, the resilience that had carried him through. His story resonated with people everywhere, drawing audiences from all walks of life, each person finding a piece of themselves in his music. Ethan's journey became a movement, a testament to the power of love, community, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. And as he traveled from city to city, sharing his story, he felt his mother's presence with him, her love a constant source of comfort and guidance. Through every challenge, every triumph, Ethan remained true to himself, a quiet, humble soul who used his music not for fame or fortune, but to bring hope, to remind people of their own strength. And as he stood on stage each night, singing the songs that carried his heart, he knew that he was fulfilling a promise to his mother, to Anna, to the community that had given him a home. Ethan's journey was one of love and resilience, a story that would continue to inspire long after the final note had faded. And in that journey, he found not only his voice but a purpose that would carry him forward, lighting the way for others to follow.